So what I'm seeing here is somebody that is a military person breaking the arm of another military service person. And that seems like a level of internal strife that does not lend itself to success in toppling a 3,000-year-old empire. Am I wrong?
No, and I think so much of this is based upon a political partisanship, as well as a bubble that exists in parts of this country and in elements of this country, but including in the U.S. military. So I think when you look at the poll numbers on this, which are astounding, this war is already less popular than the Vietnam War was. Right? I mean, when you're talking 27% support, that's what you're talking about. It's less popular than the Vietnam War was.
And this was before there was even an announcement that any American soldiers have been killed.
Right.
And on top of everything else, you and Anthony and a whole host of others get a lot more intel than we do. They say that 6 American service members are dead. We all know that it's a hell of a lot more than that. And there's probably a hell of a lot of civilians that are dead now as well. So when those numbers start coming out, when that information starts coming out, I think it's safe to say that this is going to get so much worse for those in charge. But in reality, what's the difference if you elect a Democrat? It doesn't mean anything.
Right. But you're saying, Matthew, that you think it's affecting the people in the like that are service people, that rift.
Yeah, I mean, there are. And one of the things you've heard for decades now, going back to the 1990s is all my adult life, this idea of a civil military divide. I mean, this was spoken about quite a bit in the 1990s. And then you see it now, even in terms of the enlistment rates for the military, where a very high percentage of those who enlist in the military are family members of those who are serving in the military. So it becomes very insular, right? And then so you have this bubble. And then, of course, you have all the standard reasons that are provided, the apologies for why military people don't think for themselves, if you will. And I don't mean to be dismissive like that, but just this idea that we don't make policy, we execute policy. That's above my pay grade. I care about the man or the woman to my left or right. It's that type of mentality there that allows for this bubble to exist where I could tell you about my experiences in Iraq where we just really didn't talk about it that much. I mean, you were concerned about the day-to-day. You were concerned about the missions that you had to conduct, about the well-being of your fellow, like my Marines and sailors, and so the idea of discussions when we were in Iraq, when it was clear that we were there for lies, was something that we didn't really broach with one another. But there was also too a bit of a psychological barrier, not a bit, there is a psychological barrier because that's a door you don't want to open. And for many of us, when we do open that door, you don't come back from that. And then, of course, that has severe psychiatric and psychological and moral and spiritual consequences. It's called moral injury. And from my understanding, it's the main reason why combat veterans kill themselves. I mean, so what you're talking about here, this dissonance between the reality of what's going on, the propaganda that's being told, and American service members performing that task, it can be devastating down the line. Right. And again, you have this suicide epidemic among veterans, especially among combat veterans, and moral injury is a leading cause of that. So I think you do have this rift where you have a society that has a support of this war only 1 in 4. And so that has to be replicated to a degree within the U.S. military as well, because I'll call it a bubble, but it's a porous bubble. Right. Men and women in the military, they're on social media, they're on YouTube, right? I mean, they have I tell you, men and women now have a lot more access to information than we had in 2003. I mean, I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time when as a Marine Corps captain stationed in the Pentagon, watching the war begin. And my sources were CNN and the New York Times and the Economist and the NPR, because what else did you have? The internet was in its early days in 2003, 2002. Yeah, there are some folks out there listening to Democracy Now!, but not many, right? There are some people who are part of like newsletter groups, where or folks who were monthly book clubs where they're reading Chomsky and Zinn, but not a lot of folks. And that's why I think when you look at the support for the Iraq war, which when it launched was over 70% of Americans.
Very high.
George W. Bush's approval rating in April of 2003 was 82%.
I know.
Right?
I remember Steve Nash when he was, he was a Canadian NBA basketball player who spoke out as Canadian against the war. And I remember there was like a televised game on ABC where the crowd was booing the shit out of him every time he touched the ball. It's like, get the hell out of the country. You're anti-American. You're not even an American. I'm like, boy, the world has changed a lot since 22.
What was the name? What was the name of the band that?
The Dixie Chicks.
The Dixie Chicks.
I have regret because I was living in Texas when that all went down. And so I knew W as a governor before when he was the president. And I regret not taking
I was a great governor. A great governor I was.
You were a moron. So I regret not taking a bigger stand. And I was in law school, ironically, about the whole thing with the Dixie Chicks. But I knew how screwed up that was. Like always got, and now it's just the Chicks, but always solidarity with the Chicks. Natalie Maines was badass, but
speaking of disturbing.
Ow! No one wants to fight for Israel.
His hand. Oh, his hand.
Sir. Let go of your hand. Let go of the door. Let go of the door. The senator broke his hand. A sitting U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine.
I'm just beyond. I can't. It's freaking me out. It's freaking me out. You know what it is? It's reminding me of the Joe Theismann incident. Can we not keep? I had to watch that over and over and over again for quite a while.
I remember watching that, live.
I did too.
We're all dating ourselves here, obviously, but yeah.
I was in San Francisco over Super Bowl weekend, and I was at an event, and Theismann was there, and he and I started talking, and I asked him, "Do you still?" to this day, is there still any issues with that? And he's like, yeah, I've, had to get hip replacement, a whole bunch of stuff. But,
I told you that Theismann's father was one of my husband's patients down in South Florida, and he would bring his dad in. And so he actually got, my son has a Joe Theismann signed football because his dad, Well, they all end up needing a urologist at some point.
The thing that I know you love about Theismann is that he did say if he had one game to play and he had to choose a quarterback, he would choose Joe Montana over Tom Brady. So I know you, as a Dolphins fan.
I'm a Marino girl.
This might be apocryphal, but my understanding is that the name was always pronounced Theismann, and he started pronouncing it Theismann because it rhymes with Heisman.
Interesting.
That's
interesting. They go by Theismann. I mean,
they go by Theismann, but that's the story I heard years ago. Now, I'm a New York Giants fan, so it could have been just something.
That's why you and I are friends.
Right, can you facilitate this video because it grosses me out?
Sir. Okay. Control your Senate. We're stuck in the door. Okay, sir. A U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine. Hand's stuck.
That's our Anthony.
A U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine. You're a coward. Punk. Yeah, go fuck yourself. Why do you say that? Senator? Go fuck yourself. You're a shit seal. That's why you got kicked out. Fat ass.
Oh, I so would give. I honestly.
Listen again.
If we could have a fundraiser to watch Anthony Aguilar kick that guy's ass, you would
Get stuck. A U.S. senator just broke the hand of a Marine. You're a coward. Punk.
Called him a punk. Like, okay, call him a punk. Hey, listen, if you, Mr. Senator, are so damn tough and you want to try to tackle a guy when he's got 3 or 4 other guys on him already, why don't you stand up to somebody who also was a combat vet and, handle it man to man? But of course, he walks off with a big mouth. And
what's so unhinged about this is look how big that room is.
Yeah.
Right. He wasn't 10 feet away and it was easy for him to get involved. Yeah. He came down the whole length of that room. Exactly. Very quickly to get involved. I mean, this person has no control.
And he was in his Marine uniform.
But do you know why I think this person became so unhinged? It was when Israel was mentioned. And I think if we do a little bit of digging, we'll see that said senator gets a lot of money from the Israel lobby. So basically, he was on command. Basically, he heard it, it was like, you know, like, oh, squirrel. He hears Israel. Oh, break a hand. You know what I mean? Like he's an animal. Right.
Well,
like,
Jen, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because it just so happens that I did find this nice little video from about 2 years ago about Mr. Sheehy that he probably didn't think was ever going to surface again.
I'm Tim Sheehy. I'm a recently elected U.S. Senator from the state of Montana, and I'm here as my first act as elected senator to show our allies in Israel and the broader allies throughout the Middle East that America still has a commitment to this region. And there's no question that America stands with Israel, stands with the men and women of Israel. And of course, we'll do everything we can to make sure the IDF and the men and women of the IDF have the best gear, intelligence, technology, and support they have to get this done. And of course, we've seen recent events unfold continually, from the events in Syria to, of course, broader.
All right, I'm going to pause this for a second because it's getting really annoying.
It's bad, but look what Anthony said. You guys, Anthony went to his office today and he was there and hid like a bitch. He takes 616,000 from AIPAC. That sounds about right. Yeah, it's choppy. I mean, we could just talk about what it is.
Honestly, this man's first act as an elected senator and he brags about it was to go to a foreign country. I mean, right? Yeah. I mean, like, this is any country. First of all, if your first act as an American senator is to go overseas, what the hell is going on? And then, of course, he chooses Israel, $600,000+ from AIPAC. Everyone understands why. But the fact that he was so cavalier about this, the bravado, the pride that he expresses in that video, I'm here in Israel. First thing I'm doing as a senator is I'm here in Israel, not tending to the needs of the people of Montana. I'm here in Israel. Yeah.